Well, thank you everybody for joining, and welcome to episode 2 of TimeXtender Tuesdays. We will be recording this session so you can watch it again later on YouTube and share it with your friends. We understand that all of you as attendees are muted. If you have a comment, please put it in the chat. We'll be watching the chat window, and we'll also be putting in some handy links in there. So keep the chat window open for an easy way to follow up on some of the stuff that we're talking about here. So welcome to TimeXtender Tuesdays. My name's Jay Leon, and I'm the Global Partner Marketing Lead at TimeXtender. In the next 30 minutes, we'll have a short demonstration, take your questions, and play Stump the Chumps. We hope you have as much fun attending as we are having putting on these TimeXtender Tuesdays. With us presenting today is TimeXtender's Solution Specialist Director, Joseph Treadwell, and Taylor Hagin, also a solution specialist. Before we get started, here's a quick note about the ongoing BARC survey. We put a link in the chat. If you go up to the very top of the chat, you can see a link to a blog post we have about the BARC survey. If you can take a few minutes sometime today and fill out that survey, it would make a big difference to us. We'd like to have TimeXtender included in the analysis that BARC produces, and if we get enough people to participate in the survey, then we get included in the analyst's report. So it would really make a big difference to us if you could take that survey today. It should only take a few minutes. Last week, Joseph walked us through creating a TimeXtender application server on Azure. If you missed it, check out our YouTube library at youtube.com/TimeXtender. Today, in just 15 minutes, Joseph will walk us through getting the environment ready, setting up the ODX server, project repository, and scheduler service. Then Joseph and Taylor will take your questions. So put your questions in the chat as we go through the presentation. And then finally, Stump the Chumps. It's going to be super fun. So with that, I will turn it over to Joseph Treadwell.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Jay. Appreciate it. Yeah, so thanks everybody for joining. So a couple weeks ago, we went over the process of creating the app server and virtual machine here in Azure. And then today, what we're going to go through is creating the project repository, configuring TimeXtender in this virtual machine, and getting everything up and running. And then 2 weeks from today, we're going to be going through creating an ODX storage as an Azure data lake. So we'll go through the process in Azure, creating that data lake, and then connecting to that from the ODX server. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Before we get started in configuring TimeXtender in the app server, there's a few things that we do need to have done that we went over during the last session. So if you weren't able to attend, take a look at that recording there in YouTube. We have a playlist called TimeXtender Tuesdays, and you'll be able to find that. So what we have here is the prerequisites to get to where we're at now. We need a TX app server in Azure. We need an Azure SQL Server. We need access to the TimeXtender license and ODX secret. And then, of course, we need to install the latest version of TimeXtender. What we're going to go through today are essentially these steps. And instead of calling out all the steps, I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in. So the first things first is to connect to the app server. So I'm going to go ahead and do that via RDP. So let me just open up remote desktop protocol here on my computer, and we can see that. And now, if you remember, we need the DNS name from the Azure portal. So I'll just go ahead and pull up the portal. We have the resource group I created during the last session, TX Tuesdays 1, with all of the different resources available in here. Now you can see the TX app server right in here. And that got created for us and looks like it is running, and we have our DNS name. So we just copy this name and then paste that right into the RDP window. And as you can see, I already have that done here. So, and I already have my username and password already saved nicely in there. So I can just hit connect and get connected directly to this virtual machine. All right, so this just opens right up, and we can take a look at our next step, verifying the prerequisites. So because I installed this or created this VM from the Azure Marketplace, all of the prerequisites come preloaded on this virtual machine. So I don't necessarily need to do that. However, if you are creating a virtual machine from scratch, you can take a look at all of the prerequisites available in the knowledge base. If you go into support.timextender.com, you can see the prerequisites available there. So you just get logged in and then you just search for prerequisites, and you'll find an article here, TimeXtender Prerequisites. You can look through there and you can see all the things that you need to get installed on that server. Again, if you're creating the VM on your own, and if you're not using the Azure Marketplace template. Because I use the Marketplace template, I won't need to go through any of these steps here. All right, so next thing is to configure the ODX server. So we're going to go through and do that. Now, when you first install the ODX server, the last step in that installation wizard is going to ask you to launch the ODX configuration. I didn't do that during the last session. So we need to open up the ODX configuration application. And that can be found in program files. So if we go to the C drive, go to program files, TimeXtender, ODX, you want to match the version, of course, that you have installed, the latest version. And then you scroll to an application called ODX Server Configuration.exe, and you launch that. Now that's going to open up the ODX configuration that begins immediately after the installation of the ODX. So I'm going to go through the steps here. First step is to insert the proxy server settings. I'm not using a proxy server, so I don't need to worry about that. And of course, the next step here is to get the client secret. Now, to get this client secret, you need to log into the user portal. So I'm already logged into the user portal right here. And once you log into the user portal, you'll see here on the right some information about your TimeXtender license. This is for the TimeXtender desktop application. To get your ODX secret, you simply go to ODX and repositories. And we see I do have my production repository right here. I can simply click to copy my ODX secret. And then I go back to that RDP window and I paste my secret in the window there. Go ahead and click next. And what this will do is this will get connected to TimeXtender's cloud repository and make sure we can get connected there. I'm going to create a new project. I'll call this project Data Lake. Click next. This will create a new project in my ODX repository. Next options here are defining maximum concurrent executions or port number. You can just leave these as default, pretty standard stuff here. And then the next option is to set up an admin password. So you do need to define a couple passwords here for the ODX. And what these passwords do is they allow anybody using the TimeXtender desktop application to get connected to the ODX server. Now, if you want these users to be able to do anything in the ODX, you can give them the admin password. And if you want users to only be able to connect to data and load data from the ODX into a TimeXtender data warehouse, then you would give them the user password. If you know that anybody using TimeXtender is really just going to be able to manage the ODX, then you can just use the same password for both, which is what I'm going to do here. All right, so I have that password configured, and then we have the encryption secret. This is what's going to encrypt all of your connection strings, passwords for data sources and things like that. These will all be encrypted using a default encryption, or you can define your own encryption as well. So I'm just going to use the default encryption, and here we can define a local account or another service account. I'm just going to use the local account for now, and we can go ahead and change that at a later point in time. click next, and we do want to start the ODX service when I click save. So save all my settings, and that will get the ODX server started. So we have configured the ODX server. The next step in our list here is to activate TimeXtender. So let's go back to our RDP window. We can close this, and we can open TimeXtender for the first time. Now, when you launch TimeXtender for the first time, one of the first things that it's going to do after it loads is that it's going to ask you for a license key. Now, as I mentioned, very similar to the ODX secret, we do need the license key, and we can get that from the user portal here. All right, so we can go to the user portal, and just at the home screen in the user portal, we see here we have an active license, and we can just click here to copy the key, or we can go to the details and see more details about our license. So I'm just going to click to copy the key, and now I have that key copied, and I can go back to my RDP window, and I can paste that key right in here. All right, and this is going to activate over the internet. Go ahead and click activate. Great. So looks like I got that activated okay. And the next step in the configuration wizard here is to set up an ODX server. So we know that we already have an ODX server configured, and I can connect to that directly here. So the first thing it's going to ask me is the server. Now, this is the name or the address of the server that's running my ODX, right? So anywhere that ODX server service is running, I want to put in the DNS name or address to that machine. In this case, it's running on the exact same machine that I'm on, so I can just put in here localhost. And then there's that password that I mentioned, either the admin password or the user password that we established just moments ago. We can paste that in and get that password in there. We'll see if we can get connected. Good, we got connected to my ODX server. The next step here is to set up a project repository. This is going to be a SQL database that stores and holds all of the metadata for our TimeXtender projects. Now, if you remember, 2 weeks ago when we created the Azure template, it also created an Azure SQL Server for us. We can go back to that resource group here, TX Tuesdays, and we can see in here it created this SQL server, this Azure SQL Server. So we can open up that SQL Server, and this is the server I'm going to use to create my project repository. So I want to get the server name from this overview pane here. So you go to the SQL Server in Azure, click on overview, and then you'll have that server name right here. We can just copy that server name, go back to our RDP, and paste that right in here. So I'm going to use, again, Azure SQL Server. I'm going to create a SQL database to be my project repository. The next thing is, of course, the username and password. I'm just going to use the admin username and password that I created when I created the Azure Marketplace template. It did ask me to create a username and password then, and I'm just going to paste those in now. All right, the next step here is to create a database. I'm just going to type a name in here, TX Project Repository, and I can click create. What TimeXtender is going to do here is it's going to communicate with that Azure SQL Server, and it's going to ask the Azure SQL Server to create a database. So this is what's going on now. It's going through that database creation process. It's communicating over Azure to get that database created. Once the database does get created, it's also going to need to create a number of tables required so that database can act as the project repository, as well as a few stored procedures that are in there. So we'll see that we'll see TimeXtender go through that process as we watch this window here. This does take just a few minutes, so we'll go ahead and get this loaded. And this will take, again, just a few minutes here. So creating that database, as you can see, it's switched over now to creating repository tables, creating all the different tables required in here, and now it's creating these stored procedures. So this will be just a couple more minutes here, and we'll have that database created. Beautiful. So the repository, TX project repository, has been created successfully, and now that database has been created in Azure. I can go ahead and click Next, and I have the option to start Windows Services Management. I'm not going to do that at this time, but I do want to click Finish. All right, beautiful. So we got TimeXtender configured on the Azure VM, and we have that running now in our application server. One of the last things I want to do here is to, now that we've connected to the ODX server, we've activated TimeXtender, we set up a project repository, all within just a few minutes there. The next thing is I want to configure the project repository in Azure. So as I mentioned, of course, we saw TimeXtender created that database. If we go back to that Azure SQL Server, we can scroll down and we can see that database has been created right here. So we can open up that database and we can take a look at the different possible configuration options. So you can click on Configure and you can see the exact compute tier that this database was created at. So it does get created at the base level. It's using, of course, the vCore model, general purpose, provisioned with 2 vCores. So that's a pretty basic level. If your project starts having a lot of data in there, your saves might take a little bit longer. And if you want to speed up those saves, that communication between TimeXtender and the SQL database, you can, of course, increase that. Another option is if you want to save some money, because this database, this is in Danish krone here. This is about $300 US a month for this database. This is what you're going to be paying for a project repository in Azure. However, if you do want to save some money, you can switch to serverless. What serverless does is it allows you to run that database and automatically pause that database when it's not being used. Now, very important here, we do not recommend using the serverless compute tier for a production repository, because you will have things like the scheduler service that need real-time active communication with that database. So you want to keep that live and running. When serverless does pause the database, it can take up to a minute to get that database back up and running again. So this can be a great cost-saving technique for like a POC or a dev test environment. Another consideration you do want to make here is you may want to scale this up, but you always want to match the minimum and maximum vCores here on serverless, because when Azure is scaling this database between the min and max vCores, it can drop connections. And so to prevent dropping of connections, you want to keep the min and max at the same exact level. So we'll create those as the same. We can enable auto pause here, and we can go ahead and click apply. So this is going to save us a little bit of money here on that project repository. Great. All right, so that concludes our session. We configured the project repository in Azure. If you would like, you can all follow along. You can find these instructions inside our knowledge base. First time setup in TimeXtender is the article that covers all of those details as well. So feel free to take a look at that when you have time. We'll also be, as I mentioned, we'll be recording this session, so you'll be able to watch this later if you like. All right.
Absolutely amazing what you can do in 15 minutes, Joseph. It's just super, super cool. So Taylor, how are we looking on questions?
You know, we had a few questions. I think we're pretty covered. There was one question about provision versus serverless. I think you did a nice job answering that. We had another question about a feature request that was upcoming from Mo, but I think that's a little bit outside of what we walked through today, something that we're considering. So I think with that, let's go ahead and just switch over to Stump the Chumps.
Oh my goodness, we're going to have extra time for Stump the Chumps. So,
that's good. It's a good one today. Yeah.
Do you want to introduce Ryan there, Taylor?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So Ryan was kind enough to posit this question. He and I chatted about a little bit yesterday, but I think I'll let him introduce himself. He's been a long time user. Ryan, how long have you been using TimeXtender?
Yeah, hey Taylor. I've been using TimeXtender. I was actually just looking at that before going into this, but I've been using it since March 2015, when a kind soul by the name of Brian Peterson brought me onto the Jet Reports team and introduced me to one of the most amazing tools that I've seen in my career. So I've been in reporting for a little bit over 2 decades at this point, and even built out data warehouses by hand prior to this. So I had kind of some pain points there on like, gosh, you have to add a field. You have to go through all of this stuff just to add a field. You have to change all your scripts, go through code reviews, and TimeXtender made that a thing of the past, and I love it. And so, fast forward to today, I'm the Director of Business Intelligence here at Tagunia. We are a NAV and Business Central partner in the Microsoft Gold space. We, although Tagunia started as just a NAV partner, we've kind of grown into multiple divisions, such as we have an app development team. We have obviously our ERP team, but we also do some hosting and like our platform team, which does a lot of hired out IT, as big or as small as you need. And then I head the business intelligence division. But at Tagunia's roots, we really specialize in rescues. That's where Tagunia started. That's where it got its roots. And so we still have a fondness in trying to make sure that those people are taken care of, right? Especially with ERPs, especially with TimeXtender projects, right? There's a fine line between a well-executed, well-designed project and a mess that no one knows where anything's at, right? And so that's where one of the questions, as I was speaking with Taylor in the past weeks, came up is, maybe this is a good stump the chump for you there, Justin. So the idea is it's kind of a few folds question. So I'll just kind of pose it to you and let you take it for what you will. But what would you say are some of your best practices as far as making a well-designed project? Where would your break-even point of let's scrap this and start anew, or let's clean this up and see how we start it? And mainly just kind of wanting to see how you would what your take on that would be from an expert point of view, knowing everything about the tool, right? So I'll leave that one there to you.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much, Ryan. Appreciate you joining on, and appreciate the question. So I'll do my best here. I think that's a very challenging question. Absolutely. Really, it's difficult to know because every solution, it can be so drastically different from client to client. You really want to start by first understanding where the issues are coming from. What are the issues that you're seeing? Why are there challenges? Taking a look, of course, I know we're speaking specifically about a TimeXtender project here, but also looking at the environment is important too, right? Understanding the networking, the virtual machines, all the architecture that's involved. These resources, making sure that they're healthy is one area that you always want to look at. And then, of course, going through the project and understanding what are all the different complexities? Where's the data coming from? There's also the connections to those data sources that can be challenging. Maybe it's not even TimeXtender that's having challenges. Maybe it's the connection to the data sources. And again, this can be networking issues, or it could be those source systems themselves that are being bogged down. Now, going specifically into the project, really it's a challenge, and it's more about looking at how much time would be required. Now, as you and I both know, it's very fast and easy to create projects and data warehouses in TimeXtender, and I think that's part of the challenge. That's part of the reason why people run into these situations, where because it's so easy, you can get someone who's relatively new to data warehousing, maybe doesn't know too much about what they're doing, and they can just start building things, and before you know it, you're left with a mess of different tables and joins, and nobody really knows where things are going.
That's exactly it, right? Just to add to that, I mean, saw one in the last month here where once we got into it, found out that there was 3 different item tables, different fields inside of them, named differently, and no naming conventions across the board. But you're exactly right. Because it is so easy to build on, you end up seeing people that, I can do this, right? And it can, without thinking about what you're actually building, instead of building for this specific need, I think it can get out of hand real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's really about looking and seeing how much custom work was done in there. Are there a lot of custom views, custom scripts that were used, custom table inserts, these types of things that I would say that there's definitely a need for, but others, especially new people that are new to TimeXtender, have a tendency to do more custom work than would typically be necessary or be recommended. So taking a look at how much custom work is there, and understanding all the nuances of the project, and then you really make a decision based on time, right? Is it going to be faster for me to rebuild this project by in TimeXtender, or is it going to be faster for me to try to fix what is in here? So it's really about taking a look at the project, breaking it out, and understanding the amount of time that would need to go into it. So I would say it would be mostly a time concern there that you'd be looking at for making that decision whether you're going to rebuild or not. Yeah, and this is a great opportunity. If and Taylor, I noticed, is just bringing this up in the chat, but if anyone is out there, is new to TimeXtender and wants to learn more, great option is the online training that we do have available. It goes through many of the steps that I've been through today, and it continues on in building projects and best practices of how to build projects inside of TimeXtender. So definitely take a look at that. But Ryan, do you feel that kind of answered your question?
Yeah, it did, and I appreciate the insight. It's a lot of the same kind of stuff that I do internally too. You got to weigh the time effort, right? One of the tricks that I've also used for everyone else's edification on the call is if you end up deciding that, well, maybe we need to clean it up rather than start from scratch and rebuild. Guarding tables and deleting them from your data warehouse and or models makes it for a great way to see who comes screaming, right? You can very easily guard a bunch of garbage tables, delete them from the data warehouse, and just see, give it a week. Does anyone complain that the report stopped working? Send out a kind of an all blast email like saying, run all your reports this week and tell me if anything's broken. Can help from that too. But you got it. It's time, right? And that's the one commodity none of us can make more of. So that's what it always comes down to. So
yeah, except us right here at TimeXtender, of course. That's what we're in the business of doing.
Making time matters. That's right, Joseph. I appreciate it.
But that's a really good point that you bring up. Is that's an interesting approach. Guarding the tables and deleting them from the SQL database to see if you get any late night phone calls of people's reports being broken. I guess that it's definitely one way to approach it, and you can always unguard the table and redeploy and execute it in TimeXtender. That is a nice thing. It'll just recreate all of those. And
really no effort there, because all of the logic is still in place. It's just being hidden. So it's kind of a nice quick way. So
yep. You just want to make sure that's not a history table or a billion row table.
That's a valid point.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks so much, Ryan. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Taylor. And thank you all for attending our episode 2 of TimeXtender Tuesdays. We hope you had as much fun as we did. And we hope you'll be back in 2 weeks, when we will be creating a data lake and service principal in Azure. And watch your email. We'll be sending out a link to this video tomorrow, and that'll also have links for registration. You can forward them around to your friends, and we can get even more people attending next week, in 2 weeks when we have Time Extender Tuesdays, episode 3. So thank you very much for joining today.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.